Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back. Today we are reading Hellblazer number 3, and just a little catch up on what happened in the first 2 issues. We were introduced to the main character, John Constantine, who was just getting back to England from some travel in the States. And when he got home, he saw his friend Gary Lester was there, and Gary wasn't looking too good. He was injecting bugs into his veins, and the reason he was doing that was because he had been in the Middle East, and he unfortunately found a hunger demon, and then he decided it would be a great idea to capture it. So he was able to contain it in a little glass jar, which he mailed to New York in order to get help from John, who he thought was in New York at the time. So in order to solve this problem, John had to go to Africa to figure out how the hunger demon was captured in the first place. Then he went to New York with Gary, where he found that the hunger demon was loose and was possessing people and causing them to eat what they desired most. So we saw people going crazy and eating whatever they saw in front of them, including like jewelry and a giant crucifix on the wall of a church. And seeing all this, John realizes he's outmatched, so he has to go to get some help in order to take down this demon. So he goes to visit an old acquaintance named Papa Midnight, who's also a magician, but he's of the Haitian voodoo variety. And together the men are able to call the demon to Papa Midnight's penthouse. And they do this by tying up Gary Lester, who is a heroin addict, and his need for heroin actually calls the demon there. And then they actually use Gary as a host for the demon, and they trap it inside of Gary's body. And Gary unfortunately has to die because trapping the demon inside of him was the only way to contain it. And since he was the one who released it, it was the only thing John and Papa Midnight could think to do in order to get rid of it. And the demon was defeated by it eating its own self from the inside out, and all of Gary Lester's body as well. And we were left on the last issue with John seeing the ghost of Gary Lester join the group of ghosts made of John's old friends that have all died trying to help him. So now John's got one more person as a ghost haunting him in his life. And first things first, with issue 3, we got the cover. We see John standing in front of a chain link fence, and there's like a board stuck on top of it that has a bunch of graffiti and stuff. We see a picture of Margaret Thatcher where her teeth are super long and she looks demonic. Her eyes are all red. We also see there's like a campaign sign for some governor, and someone has graffitied over a part where it says, "Warning, damage to your health." And they've graffitied in between that, "Warning, voting Tory can damage your health." And in the background, we can see a kind of foggy image of London, and above that hangs a spectral version of like a demon's face. And we also see on the cover that this is written by Jamie Delano with art by John Ridgway. And we start off on the first page with a man jogging in a pink tracksuit, and he is looking pretty sweaty, like he's definitely going for a hard run. And the narration says, "A fear of failure spurs him long into the summer evening. It's too much to take on board. A week ago, he was firmly in the spread. Life was pure gold. Now the city has shut its doors on him. He's getting shafted, but why? First, he'd taken a tumble on some high-risk failures. He could have stood that. But Sarah's Gucci tab had come in and the Coke bill. Then, some peasants had poured paint stripper on the Jaguar. Overextended, he'd missed some credit card payments and the bastards had slashed his rating. Events are overtaking him. Of course, Sarah had left as soon as the cash flow dried up. Now, unbelievably, he is overdue on the commission for the Young Turks at Mammon Investments. If he can keep ahead of them for a few more days, he might just stay in the race. But Roger Randall is running out of time." So as Roger Randall is running, we see 2 people appear behind him on the street also running. And this is a man and woman, and they are wearing matching pink tracksuits as well. And from the looks on their faces, it looks like they definitely know Roger Randall, because they are giving him crazy eyes behind his back as they run up on either side of him. And the narration says, "Suddenly, silently, they are flanking him, piston legs pounding with the tireless confidence of tigers. Startled, he steps up his pace." So the 2 runners get on either side of Roger, and as he sees them, he says, "Hi, Rod, Bella, looking good." But Rod and Bella don't say anything to him. They each take one of his arms and they begin to force him to run faster. And the narration says, "Got to show him he's fit, still on the upline. They exude success. A bouquet of power wreathes them like cologne. He's nudging the pain barrier. They don't even sweat. He can't keep up. His feet slap the slabs like fish out of water. So as Roger's trying to run and keep up with them, Bella and Rod have him by each arm, and they're kind of forcing him to run as fast as them and up his pace. And as they do this, Bella says to him, "You've fallen badly behind, Roger. We think you're fading." And Rod adds, "Mammon investments can't carry bad debts." And Bella adds, "We're high-octane people." So as they increase the pace, the narration says, "He wants to stop. A hot wind scorches his lungs. His heart is a racing engine, his body out of control." And as Bella and Rod push him even faster, Bella says, "We have to activate the penalty clause. Come on, let's try for the burn." So they speed up even more, and then all of a sudden, we see Roger's sweaty face call out in pain, and his eyes roll back into his head, and he falls down onto the concrete. And over these panels, the narration says, "But when you're in the rat race, you have to run until you drop." And it definitely seems like Roger is dead here. There's a pool of blood forming around his head on the concrete, and he is not moving. And instead of calling for help or doing CPR or something, Rod and Bella stop, and then Bella reaches down and touches her finger into the blood that's pooling underneath Roger's head. Then she opens a notebook and she marks something in the blood. When she's done with that, her finger is still covered with blood, so she sticks it out towards Rod, and Rod grossly licks it off of her finger. And as we turn the page, we see that Rod and Bella are gone, and they have left Roger dead on the ground. His feet are smoking from how fast they were pushing him, and we see the name of this issue is called Going For It. And also on the wall next to where Roger is dead, and also on the wall of the building next to him, we see a voting sign that says, "Vote Conservative on June 11th. We'll put the pound back in your pocket." But someone has added graffiti that says underneath that, "By taking it out of mine." And as we turn the page, we see John Constantine walking in inner London, and we see the date is in fact June 11th, 1987, so it is election day. And as John walks down the sidewalk, we see he's passing like a lot of homeless people and kind of street toughs and police, and also a woman who's holding a baby begging. And the narration says, "Down here, there's a despair in the air that you have to breathe to understand. Poverty plucks at your sleeve with broken fingernails." And then the woman with the baby goes over to John and tugs on his sleeve and says, "Give us a quid to feed my baby?" And as John hands her a coin, the narration continues. "Hunger flashes its teeth from the shadows, and defeat lies in the gutter waiting for the garbage truck. This is where the abandoned people live. All part of the great British return to Victorian values, I guess. Talking of old queens reminds me of Raymondi. I'm not here to write social comment documentaries. I'm here to investigate dead yuppies." Then John begins having a flashback where he thinks about a couple days ago when he went to go see his friend Ray. And the narration says, "Ray's this outrageous gay man. Runs a far-out clippings agency from a junk shop in Camden. He's got a feel for synchronicity and a penchant for the bizarre. Went to see him a couple days ago. I was looking for something juicy to take my mind off the bloody election." Then we cut to John inside of his friend Ray's house, and they're sitting and having a cup of tea. And John's friend Ray is like an older white man who pretty much looks just like John, but just older. And as Ray gets the tea ready, he's saying to John, "I know, dear boy, it's too depressing. No point in voting. I mean, none of them are on my side nowadays, are they?" And then he walks over to some sort of card catalog or file cabinet, and he begins to rummage through it, and he finds something, and he says, "Now, what do I have for you, Johnny boy?" And then he pulls something out of one of the card catalogs, and he looks at it and says, "How do you feel about yuppie deaths around Spitalfields?" And John replies, "I didn't know there were yuppies in Spitalfields." And Ray answers, "Well, they do seem to find the going tough. Hark to the voice of the tabloid press." And then Ray takes some tabloid newspaper cuttings and reads them off to John saying, "May 23rd, man drowns in guacamole. June 1st, Deb chokes on cocktail umbrella." And John begins laughing at that one, and Ray sits down and says, "There's more. June 5th, pet Persian cat fatally mauls merchant banker. June 8th, jogger dead in melted running shoes." And at these, John laughs, saying, "A jogger in Spitalfields. Now I know you're pulling my wire." And then Ray makes a joke saying he wouldn't mind pulling on John's wire. And John's narration says, That Ray, camp is Christmas. Good as gold, though. Then we end that flashback and we cut back to where John is walking, and apparently he has gone to Spitalfields. And he was on the lookout for yuppies before, and just as he had started his flashback, he saw a fancy car drive down a street that a fancy car probably wouldn't be driving down normally. So he decided to follow that, and it is a convertible, so we can see the two people inside are wearing pink tracksuits, and John follows them until they pull into the courtyard of a building. And the narration says, "From the state of this place, it looks as if he's right again. Suddenly I smell money. What the devil's brought them down here?" And as the two people exit the car, we see that it is in fact Bella and Rod from the first couple pages of the issue. And we see as they get out of their car that they have tennis rackets, and then they walk into the building. Then we cut to hell, which is a pretty big jump. But we see there's a big fat demon in a suit. He kind of is dressed like an old robber baron from like the late 1800s. And like I said, this demon is gigantic. He's not only comparatively to the other demons around him, just bigger in general, but he is very heavy. And compared to the other demons, he's like maybe 2 or 3 times the size of them. And he's smoking a cigar, and he also has a very pockmarked face, and his cheeks kind of droop down like a basset hound's cheeks. And we get some narration that says, "An elite club in the financial district of hell. An eager group of junior commodity dealers make a proposition to Blethoxy, Lord of Flatulence." And we see one of the smaller demons is talking to Blethoxy, and he's saying, "The way we read it, it's a platinum opportunity to corner the UK market." And the narration continues. "Blethoxy was one of the old school, a financial giant. For him, business was a religious commitment to the archdemon of profit, Mammon." And we're watching as Blethoxy is getting pitched to, I guess, by his minions, who apparently are part of like Hell Wall Street or something. They're trying to sell him on an idea they have to make money. So the smaller demon talking before continues saying, "On the ground, we can buy cheap, strip assets, swell our reserves, and boost the infernal dollar. Politically, the time is right. The haves are so terrified of becoming the have-nots that it's dog-eat-dog out there." And as Blethoxy listens, the narration says, "The juniors were brash and noisy, but sharp, aggressive. They were moving up." So once the demon finishes his pitch, Blethoxy answers him saying, "Blah, I admire your enterprise. Blah, ghastly, insipid place, Earth. But if you can show a capital increase, you have my backing." And the junior demon responds, "Thank you, sir." And Blethoxy continues, "However, screw up, disturb the balance of the market, and you'll be spending the next millennia slapping out corpse meat in a fast food joint." Then we cut back to John, who is sneaking into the backyard of the building that Rod and Bella went into. And John definitely thinks this building is odd, especially for them, because they pulled in with a very expensive car, and they were wearing expensive clothes, and they had tennis rackets. So obviously these are rich people, but they went into some sort of abandoned factory or multi-tenant house. So as John sneaks around back into the backyard, the narration says, "Something about this isn't quite kosher. I sniff around the back of their cozy nest. Okay, so yuppies are moving into the old rundown areas and making them fashionable, but only where they can make a profit. The property's got to be worth developing. There's not even a view here." And as he walks into the gated backyard, we see it is completely overgrown with weeds and grass and stuff. And there's also a bunch of like trash, like 55-gallon drums. And then in the background, we see the other abutting houses and factories are all dilapidated, and they have broken windows and sunken in roofs. And John's narration continues. "This is more like some outpost of prosperity, giving the finger to the starving wilderness around it. Talk about the last days of Rome. I'm all for decadence, but this is positively unhealthy." And in the panels underneath this narration, we're seeing John take one of the 55-gallon drums and a wood pallet and stack them up so that he can climb up them to get a better look into the window. And the narration continues. "What kind of rich wacko comes to a place like this to gloat and..." But the narration is cut off by a very loud noise that begins screeching through the air. And it's so surprising that John almost flies backwards off of this little makeshift ladder he's made. And he yells, "Christ, what is that appalling noise?" Then we cut to the inside of the building where we see Rod and Bella are not humans at all. They are lounging about this building that's got all these fancy things in it like stereos and TVs and stuff, which is not what you would expect if you've seen the outside. And as the screeching noise continues, we see Rod say, It's a brand new CD called Tears of Atlantis. Reawaken the desiccated souls of Hiroshima. Such a lurid sound. And then Rod the demon pulls out his banaka and he pumps a couple sprays in his mouth. And he was yelling that over to Bella, who's sitting on a Shea lounge, and she is also in demon form. And the narration says, Rodney Bubo's ganglia is feeling good, perfectly complementing the delicious ambience of the music. The taint of desperate humanity rides the anxious breeze through the window, stirring the delicate translucency of the fetus skin sun drapes, hand sewn by the corrupted nuns of the Brides of Judas order, to caress the gorgeous septic features of his lust partner, Belladonna. And then Rodney turns to Bella and says, And what did you do today, my poison flower? And Belladonna answers, Oh, I was lazy. 3 drug overdoses and syphilis for a priest. And the narration says, Her laughter is arousing, like the death choke of damned innocence. And then he walks over to Bella with what I thought was banaka, but I guess it is something else, and he sprays it into her mouth and says, Want a whiff? This is the most unholy howl. And the narration says, Infant adrenal tincture from the free-range nurseries of Beirut. Earth-grown, hell-harvested, the best. And then Bella stands up and says to Rod, Ooh, so violent. Let's go to the election party at the pits. Then later we can fill the jacuzzi with some fresh blood and do something really cruel. And then they begin to make out, and the narration says, Only the best for them now. They had done well to leave the stale confines of hell. They'd gone for it, and it was paying off. So then we cut to outside a couple minutes later, and we see John did in fact fall off the makeshift ladder he made, and he still looks as if he's in pain from the song that Bella and Rod were playing, because he's holding his ears, and the narration says, Eventually, the god-awful sound stops. I check for blood from the ears, but they seem okay. It felt like being trepaned with a dentist drill. Then all of a sudden, Belladonna and Rodney come out of the back door and walk into the backyard, and John has to get up quickly to hide behind his makeshift ladder. And I should also say that they are now in human form again, so they look like they did when they were running with Roger. And the narration says, They come out. I make like a private eye. They don't look like the sort who could make sounds like that. And as John watches them, Belladonna says, Shall we take the convertible? And Rod replies, No, I've set the intruder snares. I want to see if the new half-inch barbs will hold those wild young car thieves. And Belladonna replies, Good. I like to rub shoulders with the suffering. It really turns me on. And John heard this entire conversation, so his narration says, Nice people. I let them get a bit ahead. Bastards might be contagious. Then his narration is cut off by another loud screeching noise, and we only see John's face in this panel, and he looks very shocked and surprised, and we see Belladonna off panel is saying, Oh, Rod, please, you beast, you've drunk it all. And Rod just laughs at that. And then they walk off, and we see what John saw, and there is a dead cat on the ground where they were walking with its throat torn out. And John's narration says, I nearly trip over the dead cat. Fleas still jump from it, throat gapes, but there's no blood. My cigarette starts to taste like burning hair. That's usually a bad sign. So that loud screeching noise was the noise the cat was making when Rod ripped out his throat and drank its blood. So John follows them for a while, and he sees him go down some stairs and into what John calls a trendy wine bar. And we see the name of this bar is called The Pits. So as they go in, John follows down the stairs behind them, and his narration says, If you want to know about people, watch them at their play, when their guard's down. I'll just slip in, mingle with the crowd, and get the story on these creeps. But unfortunately, John is not very slick, and he ends up slipping down one of the steps and falls on his butt right at the door. And the doorman says, Are you all right, sir? And as John gets up, he says, Yeah, just about. You should get some lights on those steps. It's as black as hell out there. And as John walks past the doorman says, Most of our patrons prefer it that way. So as John walks into the club, he begins to walk through the mass of people, and the narration says, Nobody pays me much attention. That's fine by me. I don't want to make friends with this class of spoon-fed pond life. I try to make sense of their vacuous braying. So as John walks by people, he's listening in on their conversations, and one of the men he's passing by is finishing a conversation saying, He'd already paid an arm and a leg. And then a woman next to him says, That's what I like about business. It's so much fun. So John takes a seat in a booth, and he sits next to them, and he continues listening, and we hear one guy say, So I gazumped him through the roof. Unfortunately, it broke him. And as John listens, his narration says, "A few seconds convinces me that I'm going to need a drink. As I look for the waiter, my eyes tune to the weird lighting, and I realize the lampshade at my table has a tattoo." Then John starts looking around even more, and he notices some other stuff on the walls. The narration says, "Closer inspection shows that the murals are high-quality S&M. I'm starting to get the picture, and it's a bit sordid." Then John overhears Rodney and Bella talking, and Rodney saying, "Of course things can get better if the Tories win a third term." And Bella cuts in saying, "We're going to be unstoppable." And John's narration continues, "This lot are just a bunch of filthy rich cokehead dilettante Satanists, sex and drug thrills, with the poor folks in the urban wilderness for atmosphere." So it seems that even though John says he's getting the picture of it, he's not quite fully catching on that these are demons and not just rich yuppies that are asshole Satanists. So since he hasn't figured that out yet, his narration says, "They're just one step up from Ouija boards. I should call up something really nasty, like Belial. I bet they'd mess themselves. My drink arrives as the smell of cooking slithers into my nostrils. Think I'll give the menu a miss." So John takes a sip of his drink and immediately spits it out, and he exclaims, "Ugh, that tastes like goats! Jesus Christ, I ought to..." And I love this panel a lot because not only is John finally starting to realize what's going on in this club, but he knows what goat's blood tastes like, which is funny. And then the second he starts freaking out and spitting out goat's blood everywhere, all the other people in the club stop what they were doing and look at John like they finally realize someone else is in here that's not one of them. And John realizes it too, and he looks up at them, and the narration says, "It's as if I'd sworn in church. Suddenly I feel as welcome as a fart in an elevator." Then John stands up from his table like he's going to fight them, and the narration says, "Well, Sodom, if they want trouble." But John doesn't fight them. That was kind of just like big talk in his head. He actually goes over to the restroom, and the narration says, "Best keep my back to the door, though. One of the Ponces might hit me with his portfolio." So it seems John still thinks that these are just Satanists. Even though everybody stopped and looked at him all weird when he spit out the goat's blood, John is just a little off today. So as he's standing next to the restroom, all of a sudden the door to the women's restroom opens up, and a woman comes out, and she almost hits him with the door saying, "Oops, sorry. It's only little me. Will somebody please get me a drink? I've lost all my money." And this woman is actually like a cute little blonde woman. She's got a pink strappy dress, and she's wearing jewelry and stuff around her wrists. And John actually got lucky that she walked in because all of the people's attention went towards her and left him. So as she walks over to Rodney and a couple of his friends, John's narration says, "The woman's a wreck, bombed out of her mind. But while the jerks swarm around her, the heat's off me." And the woman is saying to Rodney, "It's terrible, really. The shares you bought me were doing so well. There was oodles of money. But then this man said he owned this racehorse, and I let him make a bet for me. Then, it's a bit embarrassing, really, but I had to have this abortion, and I spoiled the Chinese carpet with some wine. Now I've gone and crashed the Porsche. So if you could give me a teensy bit more of time to pay on your commission, I'd be ever so grateful." And she leans on Rodney like she's kind of flirting with him so that he'll give her an extension on his commission. And he says to her, "Well, I'm sure that would be ecstasy, darling, but I'm afraid Maman Investments will insist we foreclose." And then Bella walks up next to her and says, "The contract is binding. You must forfeit all intangibles in perpetuity." And as the woman is taking all this in, Rodney pulls out what looks like cocaine and says, "Still, have a toot, old gal. No hard feelings, eh?" So the woman snorts the cocaine, and then she begins to talk again, saying, "But what do I actually and then she pauses with that sneeze, and all of a sudden, something begins spewing out of her mouth as she grabs her throat. And it sounded like she was about to ask, what does she actually owe them? Because what exactly is all intangibles in perpetuity mean? And Rodney fills us in as he laughs at her, saying, "Only your eternal soul, you silly little bitch." And he laughs as her soul leaves her body, and I guess he collects it, and we're left with her body still standing, but as it's about to fall, her head is completely burned up as if it lit on fire. And we really haven't seen what John was doing in the middle of all this, but he figured out what's going on now. Because as we turn the page, we see John just jumping through one of the windows out into an alley, and the narration says, It takes me a couple of seconds to recognize the smell of brimstone. Then the truth kicks me straight through the window. Stupid, stupid, stupid! My brain must have gone into hibernation. I've jumped into bad evil with both feet. And then John takes off running down the street and his narration continues. But even as a prehensile tongue of fear squeezes my bowel, I'm in danger of breaking up laughing. It's so bloody mad. It all makes perfect sense. Mammon investment contracts, all intangible perpetuities. They're demon yuppies, soul brokers from hell. They've seen their chance and they're going for it. Let's see if they've got the stomach to follow me through here. So John runs into a Salvation Army hostel, and as he runs through it, his narration says, "It'd be like drowning in mother's milk. The political climate's perfect for them. Profit is definitely the top dog of the 80s. For monetarism, read Satanism. I bet the upwardly mobile have been queuing to sell their souls. Why haven't they taken me yet? It's all a big joke to them, a game. They'll have to be taught. I'm not anybody's toy." Then we get a shot of the demons, and it seems that they have stopped chasing John, because as he gets out of the Salvation Army hostel, it looks all clear in the alley behind him. And John's narration says, "Looks like I've lost them long enough to get home and set up proper defenses. Doesn't look as if I'll have time to vote." Because if you remember, it is voting day today. So then we cut to John in his apartment, and he is standing in the center of a circle, and there's like a little altar in it, and he's holding a sword, and there's 2 candles on either side of him that are burning, and there's a pentagram scrawled on the door behind him, so it definitely looks like he's about to do some magic, and the narration says, "Half of my bloody magic kit is either lost or borrowed, and there's no time to prepare myself properly. But I'm mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take it anymore," to coin a phrase. "When it comes to arrogant parasites, I've got a short fuse. So look out, suckers. Here comes the revolution." So John bends down and he lights some incense, and the narration says, "The smoke from the incense of summoning is worse than tear gas, and the magic circle's a bit shaky. Never mind, it'll have to do. I've never bothered with the cats for this ritual, too hard to catch, and they shriek like fury when you impale them. Anyway, all that messing about with rotten corpses and pain stuff is really just there to impress the marks. All you really need are the right contacts and a bit of nerve." John definitely has those 2 things, so he holds out his sword and he says, "Wake up, Blethoxy, you bladder of bile. It's me, John Constantine. I want a word with you." And then he pulls out a medallion and holds it up, and he says, "Come on, you pus sack. Don't keep me waiting. I'm calling in your marker now." And then a demon does poof in front of him, but this demon is not Blethoxy. And it's funny because this demon is wearing like a butler suit, so it must be Blethoxy's butler. And John looks at him and says, "Who the hell are you? I called for the Lord of Flatulence, not one of his discharges." And the butler demon says, "In hell, I am the steward demon of the club wherein Lord Blethoxy takes his ease. He commands me to inform you that your ritual was incompetent and insulting. You should have used the cats." And as John puts his medallion back on, the butler says, "If you wish to petition him, you must follow me below. However, our club has strict rules, and you are improperly attired." And John's taken aback by this. He says, Cut the crap, chum. Here, will this do?" And then he puts on a tie, and the demon says, "Admirably, sir. Please, follow me." And the demon beckons him into what I assume is a portal, because they were in John's flat a second ago, but now they are walking down some stairs into what looks like hell. So as John walks in, the narration says, "I've bested the vile Blethoxy once before, so he's going to be very suspicious of me. Just the job. He's got to assume that my mind follows the same greedy logic as his." Then as John walks down the stairs, he notices that the steps are not made of stone. They are actually made of people's faces that are still alive, like underneath him. So with every step, he's actually stepping on someone's face, and his narration says, "It's a disconcerting experience, walking on a surface that wails and crunches softly underfoot, but you can't keep apologizing." And personally, that's one of my favorite panels in this issue. I just think it's so funny that, yeah, he's just walking on people's faces, and I just imagine him being like, "Oh, sorry, mate. Sorry. But then eventually he just has to give up apologizing because there's too many people that he's stepping on. So when they get to the bottom of the stairs, John sees a pair of double doors. It looks like it's a sauna, and John's narration says, "Razor blades of nervous energy etch into my skin. This has got to be one of my crazier stunts." And then the butler holds out a towel and says, "The separation room, sir. Would you care for a plague towel?" And John walks past him and through the doors and says, "Nah, I'll rough it today. Ta." And just in case you didn't know, ta means thanks. So John walks into the room and we see that he's standing immediately right in front of Lord Blothoxy. The last time we saw him, Blothoxy was surrounded by his minions in his little throne room. He had on his Mr. Monopoly Man suit. But now he's just naked because this is basically a sauna. And he's sitting there with a towel over his lap, thank God. And as Blothoxy sees John come in, he says, "I wonder, mortal, is it bravado or idiocracy that brings you to where angels fear to tread?" And John doesn't answer him right away. His narration says, "My guts are writhing like epileptic snakes. Putrid vapor sears my eyes and prickles my skin like acid. The heat is unbearable. Still, it would be, wouldn't it? Best make this as quick as possible." And we see John is very sweaty already, and he answers Blothoxy's question saying, "Greed, actually, chum. You see, I want to sell my soul. I thought I'd cut out the middleman, come straight to the head of the pustule, as it were." Then Blothoxy looks at him curiously as if he's thinking about this, and he says, "Normally, I wouldn't bother with a single soul. I deal in genealogies, but with you, I'll make an exception." And over this panel, John's narration says, "Bleeding Nora, I've overestimated him. He's buying the dummy. Don't crack up. Back up the bluff." So John can't believe Blothoxy is buying this, but he keeps a straight face and he says, "Make your best offer then. I've no time to haggle." So Blothoxy pulls out a quill and a parchment. I don't know where he got those because he's naked, but he had one on hand apparently. And he says, "I pay the market rate, no more, which I may say is a very beneficial deal. The UK market is very buoyant at the moment. Prospect of a conservative third term." And John says, "Oh, well, I expect you've seen the latest opinion polls. Where do I sign then?" And then I guess because there's no hesitation from John, Blothoxy gets suspicious and he says, "Wait, I don't trust you, Constantine. You are not a stupid man. Why do you wish to take profits now? What inside knowledge do you have?" And then he gets really close to John's face, and John looks kind of scared. And Blothoxy continues saying, "I'm right, am I not? You think the left wing is going to win the election, and the UK soul market is going to crash." And then Blothoxy crumples up the parchment, and they do not do the deal. And then some of his lesser demons grab John by the shoulders and begin to fly him out of hell. And as John is leaving, we do see he's got a bit of a smirk on his face, like this is exactly what he wanted to happen. And Blothoxy is yelling after him, "I admire your nerve, Constantine, but I didn't amass one of the greatest fortunes in hell, being duped by second-rate confidence tricksters. Throw this loser out." But as John is being thrown out of hell, we see another demon on a phone call. And this is actually the demon that John said he was going to call up in the club that might scare everybody that he thought were Satanists. And the demon is saying, "Bilal here. Sell all the UK stock immediately. Move into Catholics or Muslims. Do it now, before the news panics the exchange." So basically, John has frightened these demons that work in the Infernal Dollar Exchange. And now they think the Infernal Dollar is going to crash like the soul market in hell, because John hinted that the liberals might win. And as John is being thrown through the portal, his narration says, "Good, that's fanned the fire a bit." But then as he gets through the portal, we see he falls down on the floor in his flat, and there are already demons there. And the narration says, "Seems like the party's come to my place. Still, there's more than one road that leads to hell, they say. Guess I should have taken more care over the magic circle." So John just happened to land by that sword that he had while he was doing the spell, and he holds it out to the demons as he stands up and he says, "Keep back, or I'll put the mark of Zorro on you slimy bastards." And then one of the demons says, "I think the nasty little toad just threatened us, chaps." And then he reaches out and touches the sword and says, "Not only does he gatecrash our bash and vandalize our premises, now he offers us violence." And then because the demon touched the sword turns into what looks like a piece of meat in the shape of a dollar sign. And one of the other demons says, "I think we're going to have to skin him and tan his hide." And another one says, "Good, I need some new seat covers for the BMW." And as we turn the page, we see John is hung upside down, and in front of him, he's seeing the face of Maggie Thatcher on TV. And his narration says, "Feels like I was hit by a truck. As I come to, my first reaction is that they've sent me straight to purgatory." And the reason why he's saying that is because he does not like Maggie Thatcher, and now he's being forced to watch her speech. And her speech is saying, "I intend to win this election and go on and on. My government will provide the freedom for private enterprise to flourish, to create wealth so that we can afford to care for the sick and the disadvantaged." And as John watches this, his narration says, "Jesus, damned to the help yourself society, where the strong help themselves to whatever they want and the weak are left to help themselves. At least I won't be lonely for long. The morally bankrupt will be moving here in droves, forcing up the property values and cluttering up the streets with German cars. It's beyond a bloody joke." Then Thatcher finishes her speech saying, "With our guidance, Britain will be great again, a nation of growth and opportunity, a symbol of strength." And then John says out loud, "Isn't she marvelous?" And John's narration continues, "It takes me a few moments to summon the nerve to look down and see what kind of devil they've set to gnawing off my feet. I suppose I should be relieved. It appears they haven't even started yet." So as John looks around, he sees that there are definitely all the demons that attacked him, and that in fact they're in the club, the Pits. And one of the demons sees that John is moving and says, "Oh look, it's conscious." And then the demons begin to walk over to John and they say, "Pathetically helpless, isn't it? Do you think it's scared? Oh, it smells scared." Then they begin to push John around, and because he's hanging from the ceiling, he begins to swing like a pendulum back and forth. And on the TV in front of John, Maggie Thatcher has finished her speech, and I guess the newsman is saying, "And as we wait for the first official election returns, all the opinion polls are predicting a further swing to the right. The Conservative Party looks certain of a strong majority in the House of Commons." And all the demons scream out, "Hooray, Maggie, 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 Maggie Thatcher!" And as John swings, his narration says, "But keep playing, you bastards. I can take it. The longer you go on, the more chance of my long shot coming in. You think you're invulnerable. Ha! You're just adolescents, nasty, savage children, noisy bubbleheads who think you're lords of creation. Well, I've got news for you. I've been screwing up prats like you since I was a kid. I may always have been a peasant, but at least I'm a clever peasant." And then one of the demons yells out, "Oi, servant, bring glasses. It's time for a toast." And I actually believe that this demon that spoke is supposed to be Rodney because he's wearing the same kind of clothes Rodney had before. So Rodney Demon goes over to John and he puts his pointer fingernail up to John's neck like he's going to cut it. And he says, "Hurry, I want to drink before the terror curdles his blood." Then all of a sudden, the butler who is coming over begins to shake and tremble like something's happening to his body. And John sees this, and his narration says, "Oi, oi, this could be it. Smells right." So it looks like this might be part of his plan somehow. And because the butler is shaking so much, he begins to spill the drinks, and Rodney, the demon, smacks him in the face and says, "You imbecile!" And it's obvious that this butler is not a human, even though he looks kind of human, because as Rodney backhands his face, the butler's head flies off. But his body gets on its hands and knees and begins crawling towards his head rolling on the ground. And then the butler's hands find the head and they put it back on the butler's body. And as he does, we see it's transforming. The face is beginning to look more like Blethoxy. And one of the demons says, "Lord Blethoxy, have you come to join the celebrations?" And Blethoxy says,
"And celebrate what? My ruin?"
And then he grabs Demon Rodney by the face and he says,
"I don't know how you've done it, but you've panicked the market. UK soul values are going through the floor. The smart money's moved out, and I'm left holding worthless stock."
And Rodney replies, "But how? It can't be true." And Blethoxy answers,
"Then read this and consider yourselves closed down."
And then Blethoxy opens his mouth and a bunch of ticker tape flies out of it like where his tongue should be. And all the demons in the room begin to drown in ticker tape, and Blethoxy yells out,
"You've screwed up completely. The infernal dollar is wiped out."
And as the demons drown, they yell, "No, please." And John's narration says, "That fixed those bastards." And I think the ticker tape turns into some kind of like molten lava or acid or something, because the demons begin to like melt away and drown in it. And then John actually has to pull himself up so that he won't be hanging in it. So now John is left in a room full of boiling liquid, and then it looks like they're back in hell, like the walls are all rock and everything. And Blathoxy is standing there alone in front of John, and John looks at him and the narration says, "Knock the bottom right out of their market." And then Blathoxy turns his attention to John, and the narration says, "I hold my breath and play dead. I might just get away with this. Blathoxy would lose too much face if he let on I'd bluffed him again." Then Blathoxy says to John,
"Don't think I've overlooked you, Constantine. One day I shall pluck out your soul and wear it as a buttonhole."
And then Blathoxy and all the demons and liquid and everything disappear, and we're back with John hanging upside down in the club, The Pit, and we see John is smiling, and the narration says, "I stop holding my breath. I hardly dare believe it. Talk about election fever. That's what I call a gamble. You can't get higher stakes or longer odds. And I won. I batted them out of the park." And then John exclaims out loud, "I won, and I bloody feel good about it." But that joy quickly goes away because the TV is still on, and Maggie Thatcher comes back up, and John's narration says, "Then I remember, I'm hanging upside down in front of a TV screen that's going to be broadcasting election news till dawn." And over the picture of Margaret Thatcher on the TV, the newscaster is saying, "And the first results of the 1987 general election has been announced. As predicted, the Conservative Party holds a strong majority." And in the last panel of this issue, we see John is still hanging upside down, and he can't do anything. He's stuck there, and the narration says, "Like I said, there's more than one road to hell." And that, my friends, is the end of the issue. So if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, at gmail.com, and we will see you on the next one.